Hey everyone, finished watching the next Dino Thunder episode, Lost and Found in Translation. So, Connor, Ethan, and Kira are at Haley's cyberspace surfing through TV channels, and they happen across a Japanese show based on their own heroic exploits. It's been dubbed into English. Alright, my suspension of disbelief is broken. America hates dubbing live action. Connor immediately dislikes it, but the others are curious to see what it's like. The dubbing is pretty bad. Despite this, Ethan and Kira enjoy themselves, while Connor remains a killjoy. The show shifts from the heroes to the villains, and two of the villains look like they might have been in the abyss of evil. A little girl zaps the other villains. How did Japan know Mesagog was fond of zapping his minions? The villains come up with an evil plan to give the Rangers bad hair days. Okay. Connor thinks that's a silly plan. Hijinks go on for a while, involving food, and then an old Irish-Japanese man shows up. Alright. The goofy stuff is interrupted by an alarm alerting the Rangers of aliens. Must be Bandai behind this. And then we also learn that the Black Ranger in the show is named Black Ranger. Hamilton Comics? The monster appears, and Connor thinks it looks ridiculous and unbelievable, and Kira asks if it's any stranger than what they've been fighting. The monster summons Triptoids, which is kinda weird, since they've only showed up in reality twice. And since this is a TV show, and those were pre-existing characters, did whoever make this show have to secure the rights to the Triptoids from whatever game company created them? The monster's bizarre power is throwing mushrooms at people that cause them to grow weird hairdos. There's an odd scene where the Rangers of the show and their Zords all get goofy wigs. Ethan and Kira thinks it's funny, Connor feels insulted, he leaves, but Ethan knows he'll come back because he left his backpack behind. In the show, the monster retreats after a baseball player hits one of its magic mushrooms back at him. The man is a famous baseball pro, Whacker Wilson. The Blue Ranger knows who he is. Wilson tells them that he hurt his back and he's looking for the world's greatest chiropractor, Kenny Yukito. It turns out that's the Blue Ranger. Connor comes back and decides to stay. Inside the show, Kenny fixes Wilson's back and Wilson offers him to be his personal chiropractor and he'll make a lot of money. Kenny turns down the offer, telling Wilson that being a Power Ranger is more important than money. Kira makes a comment about how she's starting to see the moral of the story, and Connor still isn't sure about the show. The monster goes to Whacker Wilson and asks for an autograph, but it's a trick, and he puts a mushroom on him. The monster awkwardly cheers that American sports heroes are so gullible. This pushes Connor over the edge, and he tries to block the TV. The others convince him to give the show another chance. Silly stuff continues in the show, and Connor begins to get into it, and by the end, he loves it. The next day, Connor is inspired by the show to write his social studies report on Japanese and American culture after watching a rerun of the show. I've never really been a big fan of this episode, but this time around it was a nice change of pace from the typical Power Rangers formula. There's no bad guys or morphing outside of the TV show. It's a genuine slice-of-life episode. I like the concept of the episode far more than the actual execution. The weakest element is definitely the extremely poor dubbing, and I understand that it's intentionally bad for comedy, but I don't think this particular Abba Ranger episode really needed silly dubbing to make it look any sillier. It was already, like, a pretty out-there episode. Which made me think it's a bit ironic that Sentai has a reputation for being more serious and mature than Power Rangers, when this is probably most likely the most widely seen episode of Sentai. One thing really distracting is how the dubbing rarely matches the tone of the original actors. It doesn't match their body language, it doesn't match their facial expressions often, and when you go and watch Abba Ranger, everything, feels natural, everything works. And, I know that it had to be dubbed because this is for American audiences. Generally, you don't want to have a show with subtitles for American audiences because we're stupid and we don't want to read. And also, America hates dubbing live action because it doesn't match the mouth movements and people think that looks weird. Jorgito Vargas Jr. voices Kenny Yukito, one of the rare instances of an actor getting to play two different Rangers in two different seasons. He played Blake, the Navy Thunder Ranger, in Power Rangers Ninja Storm. Two of the villains of this episode will make another appearance later on this season, not just on the show within the show, but as Lothor's minions that he found in the Abyss of Evil, despite them not really looking like Ninja Storm monsters. I'll talk about that when I get to that episode. I'm surprised the Triptoids show up, only their second appearance outside of Game On. Additionally, they're from a video game, and it's so weird to me everyone just kind of forgets that. No one makes a comment on the Triptoids being there. The Triptoids are so ill-fitting, it makes me wonder why didn't they just write them out? Or just cut them out? They don't have a big role. And I mean, they could have reshot some scenes and put it in there. That would have been funny to have them watching Japanese Power Rangers, but then they still reshoot a few scenes. I kind of wish the Rangers were watching an episode featuring Mikoto, the White Ranger of Aba Ranger Abari Killer. It would have been cool to see how they react to Trent's counterpart. Although this is one of those episodes where they just kind of forget Trent exists and what he's going through. Again, it's like Zed and Dino Fury. They know he's out there and they just don't acknowledge it. Which I guess is better than, like, if they were to actually have Trent in this episode. Which is a nice thing. There's no villains, nothing other than, like, the three main Rangers of Dino Thunder just watching TV. That's the whole plot. One very big positive I can give this episode is we get a much appreciated reprieve from Disney's crappy stock music, and we even get to hear Aba Ranger's theme and some Sentai music. Which is kind of infuriating, knowing that Disney apparently has the rights to use, like, Sentai's music, and they just don't. They just leave it there, and instead they're like, we're gonna use our own crappy, annoying stock music that we use way too often. Whacker Wilson's original name was Bucky Bonds in Aba Ranger, which reminds me of Bucky Barnes, Captain America's sidekick who became Winter Soldier years later. Probably just a coincidence. I do wonder why they bothered to change Bucky Bonds' name to a completely different English name. Despite the Blue Ranger getting a name, Kenny Yukito, he's credited as just Blue Ranger Teen. When I first saw this episode, I really didn't care for it. But I still watched it quite a bit for the same reason I watched Legacy of Power. It was a rare glimpse into what I wanted to see. In the case of Legacy of Power, it was old Saban-era seasons. With this, it's Sentai. Back when this originally aired, Sentai was really scarce in the US. There weren't DVDs of it. There wasn't even really internet very much. Like, internet was around in 2004, 2005, when this was coming out, but being able to look and watch Sentai episodes online wasn't common yet. And this also made me remember years ago the Lost Episodes special where we got a little teeny tiny peek into Zyuranger. And all these little crumbs just made me wish this episode's reality could be ours. Sentai dubbed and airing on TV in the US, and everyone's into it. In my lifetime, the only dubbed tokusatsu show I've ever seen on TV was Ultraman Tiga, the 4Kids version. Ugh. I mean, I watched it because I love tokusatsu, and like there it is. It's on TV. It's for free, but like, yeah, I wasn't a fan of the dubbing then. I don't like it now. Watching this episode again made me realize I may have liked this episode far more if it were a Ninja Storm episode. The cast in Ninja Storm had a great chemistry, and seeing them riff a show would be golden. It'd be just a chance to relax and have their personalities carry the episode. With Dino Thunder, it works well enough, but I just don't really care for these characters' dynamic as much as I liked the Ninja Storm Rangers' dynamic. So yeah, I'm still not a fan of this episode, but I respect what the creators were going for. I get the idea, but I just don't think in execution it worked as well as it could have. So next time is an episode very important to me, though not for a good reason. So yeah, that's it for this one. Hope you enjoyed it. See ya.